Ormund is the son of Lord Hobart Hightower, and after Hobart's death, Ormund inherits everything: the title, the armies, and the city of Old Town itself. That makes him the head of House Hightower, and, by extension, one of the most powerful men in the Seven Kingdoms who isn't a Targaryen. His bloodline connects him directly into the war. He's the nephew of Otto Hightower, the hand of the king who spent 3 reigns manipulating the throne from the shadows. He's the cousin of Alicent Hightower and Gwaine Hightower. Ormund isn't some random lord dragged into a war he wants no part of. He's core Hightower royalty, and when the Hightowers go to war, he's the one leading the army. And it's a serious army. In the book, his host marching out of Old Town is described as roughly 1,000 knights, 1,000 archers, 3,000 men-at-arms, and thousands more less disciplined soldiers behind them. One of the largest single forces fielded in the entire war. His job is simple on paper: march the Reach's strength to King's Landing and keep the Greens in power. It doesn't stay simple. On the way, Ormund's forces get caught at the Battle of the Honeywine, nearly pinned between 2 hostile armies with defeat looking almost certain. Until Tessarion, ridden by his own squire, Daeron Targaryen, shows up, who turns the entire battle around. Fire and Blood isn't written like a novel. It's written like a history book, compiled centuries later from unreliable court records and secondhand accounts. And Ormund's army was never near the people writing those accounts. So what we get in the source material is almost entirely logistical: where his army goes, what battles it fights, how many men he loses. We don't get his thoughts, we don't get his voice, we don't get a single scene of him actually talking to anyone. Which means every personality trait you've seen on screen, the charm, the cruelty, the ideology, the relationship with Daeron, all of that had to be built from almost nothing. And that's exactly what makes Ormund such a fascinating case study and adaptation. So let's talk about what the show actually did with that blank page. So what did the writers invent exactly? Start with the small stuff, because it tells you a lot. Ormund is established as a man obsessed with control and cleanliness. He has a visceral reaction to bad smells, at one point ordering an unwashed messenger be given a bath before he'll deal with him, and insisting on bathing himself the moment he arrives somewhere new. He thinks of himself as a scholar, someone who studies histories, collects tapestries, writes ballads, a man of refinement surrounded by soldiers. None of that is in the book. All of it is doing the same job: building a portrait of a man who sees himself as civilized, in a war he frames as civilization against savagery. And that self-image is the key to the whole character, because the show gives him an actual ideology, something Fire and Blood never had room to explore. Ormund doesn't see the Targaryens as rightful rulers at all. In his eyes, dragons aren't a divine mandate, they're a magic trick, a species he considers cunning but fundamentally inferior to men like him. His loyalty isn't really to Aegon or Aemond, it's to an idea: that Westeros should be ruled by someone raised in the faith of the Seven, not the Valyrian bloodline. Which is exactly why, when both Aegon and Aemon become unreliable, Ormund doesn't panic, he pivots. He decides to crown Daeron instead. That's where the show's biggest invention comes in, and it's the emotional core of the character: his relationship with Daeron Targaryen. In the show, Ormund isn't just Daeron's commanding lord, he's effectively raised him since infancy, after taking the boy in as his father's ward. He's described as fatherly toward him, and that makes what he does with that bond genuinely unsettling. When one of his soldiers assaults a woman in Tumbleton, and her brother strikes back, Ormund doesn't punish the soldier through his own men. He manipulates Daeron into carrying out the execution himself, putting the sword in the boy's hand and letting him discover, in real time, what loyalty to House Hightower actually costs. It's not random cruelty, it's grooming an heir. He's teaching Daeron how to rule the way he thinks a king should rule, and using the boy's love for him to do it. So, before we talk about Ormund's and Daeron's relationship in the books, let's talk about how Daeron is in the books first. Daeron grew up far away. He was raised to be a knight and a squire. He's described as kind and thoughtful. He didn't grow up angry or bitter like his older brothers. He's the only son of Alicent, who actually seems normal. Daeron represents everything Alicent actually wanted her sons to be: dutiful, respectful, and religious. When Daeron joins the war, he isn't just fighting for the crown, he is fighting to save his mother's legacy, a villain. Daeron grew up away from King's Landing, away from the toxic politics, away from the constant manipulation of the royal court. While Aegon and Aemond were becoming products of resentment and pressure, Daeron was in Old Town. Unlike almost every major player in the Dance of the Dragons, Daeron isn't driven by ego. He isn't obsessed with prophecy. He doesn't crave power for himself. And he isn't trying to prove he's the toughest dragon rider alive. That alone already makes him different from almost everyone in this war. After Daeron's young nephew, Prince Maelor, was murdered by a mob at Bitterbridge, Daeron and Ormund led the sack of the town in retaliation. When the Lady of Bitterbridge begged for mercy, it wasn't Ormund who refused her, it was Daeron. He rode Tessarion over the town as it burned, and then, the way so many stories from the Dance of the Dragons end, The relationship simply stopped. Ormund was killed at the First Battle of Tumbleton. Without him, his army came apart. Divided command, rival factions, no one able to hold what he'd built, until it dissolved completely soon after. The book never tells us how Daeron took the news. It doesn't have to. A boy sent away from a poisoned court, raised by a man who called him kind and clever, knighted with his own sword after saving his life, hardened by war into someone who could burn a town without blinking. Whatever Ormund built in that boy, it outlived him, for better and for considerably worse.